As educators, we have long known the value of strong family-school relationships to a child's education. It's for this reason that we nurture our parent partnerships and maintain ongoing communication with families about our school programs, services, and activities. What you may not know is that this communication, in order to be compliant with federal law, must be understandable to all parents in your school, even those who may not speak English. So, in today's session, we'll talk about some tools and resources that will help you ensure that you are fulfilling your obligation to communicate meaningfully with LEP parents in your school. Often, to be considered meaningful, these communications must be disseminated in the parent's home language. And for the record, the difference between a translation and an interpretation is simply the mode of delivery. Translations are written communications, and interpretations are oral. Generally, notes or documents sent home to parents are translated, but parent-teacher conferences, IEP meetings, and parent outreach sessions are interpreted using a bilingual interpreter who sits in the room bridging the communication from English into the parent's language. So first, let's take a look at the whys. Why is it that we provide translation and interpretation services to our parents? Well, aside from the ethical reasons we have for keeping parents apprised of school information and events that impact their child's education, it's also the law. In fact, it's been the law since 1964. This is when the Civil Rights Act was signed, banning discrimination of all sorts, including due to national origin, which subsequent Supreme Court decisions inexorably link to home language. It's important to note that this is not a title program law, and therefore title program funds may not be used to fund the translation or interpretation of general communications. General communications are those that go out to the overall school population. Okay, so what needs to be done? Well, there are 3 main steps to take. The first step is learning about your unique parent community, the parents of students in your school. This is the identification step. Gather and review information about what your family's language needs are. Then, looking at the various non-English languages represented, what are the proportions of each one to the whole? Meaning, what % of your EL parents speak Spanish? What % speak Vietnamese? What % Arabic, and so on. Knowing all of the languages represented in your community and their prevalence will help guide you through the next step, planning for communication services. This second step, where your leadership team develops a communication plan, has a few elements you'll want to be sure to cover. First, develop a written plan that clearly explains your school's language assistance process to faculty and staff who interact with parents. Make sure that it lists the procedures for how LEP parents will be informed of programs, services, and activities in a language that they understand. Include guidance on how personnel will secure translations or interpreter services for parents and what the timeline for obtaining these services is. Your plan should also indicate how your school or your district ensures that the translators and interpreters are qualified, competent, and familiar with specialized terms and concepts, such as those needed in special education meetings or discipline proceedings. And lastly, we move to the third and final step, providing services. Make sure that you notify your LEP parents that free language assistance provided by qualified translators and interpreters is available to them, and provide an explanation of how to go about requesting that assistance. Don't forget about proactive translations. The Office for Civil Rights and Department of Justice have specified documents such as progress reports, report cards, discipline and attendance policies, and permission slips as some written communications that should be considered high priority when instituting a parent communications policy. And finally, you might consider assigning a staff member to lead a committee to work on LEP communication issues. Determining which documents should be translated or which meetings might need an interpreter often requires a judgment call, and a team of cross-functional staff who've developed an expertise in this realm can be a great resource for teachers who, during the school year, are often the main communicator with parents. For more in-depth information, please check out the EL Toolkit, Chapter 10, Tools and Resources for Ensuring Meaningful Communication with Limited English Proficient Parents at this web address. In January 2015, a very comprehensive guidance letter about these requirements was released by the U.S. Department of Education and the Department of Justice. It can be found on our Georgia DOE website at this web address. Thank you so much for taking the time to learn more about LEP communications in your school or school district. We appreciate your attention.